let's have a look at a couple of areas. Here's one that's fairly big. I've picked a gouge and I'm pushing it around like this. I could certainly put it in with a mallet and this hardwood like this, but this gouge pretty much matches that shape. So I can take this off downhill here like this, and now we're coming into a tighter area, just as we've got a tighter area down here. So let's have a look at what happens. So definitely a narrow gouge here, but as this wall comes in at an angle and this wall comes in at an angle, of course this is going to get narrower and narrower still, and this is where you're going to need really narrow little gouges. What I've done here, when I put my tape in along this edge, you can see there's a little bit of pink there, so I've changed the line a little bit, but what I did was I scored a line through there. This is where this bottom bit of the petal come through, so I've got a scored line here. So I can just, for the moment, just nibble that back, and I'll worry about this bit when I come to do the carving. So I can isolate a few bits, get down to my narrow gouges, like that, so I can clean that bit up. Now what about this sort of corner? This is a fairly open corner. I can run the wall up here, very much like a relief letter carving this way, and I can pull that line up this way, and of course this line is now going to go into the background, into the book itself rather. So we'll get that like that, and then we'll find probably that we haven't got a tool that will get into that corner, so that's where we'll come in with a a skew chisel like this. I'm going to nick that off here like that, so we'll be able to clean up corners that way. This corner is a bit more tricky. So what I'm going to do is score this down here like this. So this is scored through, if you remember right from the beginning. So I've got a line that's coming through there. I'm going to push that down here, make that stab cut. Then I'm going to pick this line up, probably best with the tool I was using. And what's going to happen is that these two edges are going to meet at an angle, of course, here. So this bit here is rising up. I hope you can see that. This bit rises up to the surface and joins the surface more or less there. Let's clean that up so I can see how I can use my thumb as a little pivot here and use that like a guillotine corner to pull that out there, so I can actually score that down into the wood. Now I can get so much of that out with a skew chisel coming in this way, of course. I'll have to turn the work around for that. But one of the tools that is really useful will be these short bent skew chisels. So these are two, and I'll put notes below, that I find very useful for this sort of work, and will come in and nick it off, and you can be able to get right into corners in a way you wouldn't otherwise. So that's what I'll work in there. So how it works really is you score into there, and then you can sort of come in and pull that out. If we look at this side, here's another one. This is an inside curve. Again, I pick a gouge that'll fit there. Let's have a look. Push that a bit of an angle. Straightening out there. So there. So if you remember, we have to put a stab cut in here and a stab cut in here. Now these petals are quite high. These are the full depth at this point. So I think that's pretty much going vertical here. So again, this cut here is very much like that one there. pull that out and pull that one out. A bit more of a curve. This one will come down in here. This is quite again a shallow curve. But if this is not right, I will pick a better gouge that's a better shape. But I'm setting in the edge of the petal here. There's the edge of that one. Make sure that's in there. And then again, we clean the background. But here's the problem, is this edge here is stopping me getting in. I can work over there and over there, but I can't really get to the middle. And that is where something like this, which is a spoon bent or short bent gouge, comes into its own. Because you can get right in there, look. Not cleaning that up. So you'll definitely need some of these if you've got a complicated drawing. And remember that this depth here, this depth and this depth should be all the same, as it should be all the same around. So keep thinking about that. Take that off. Again, in that corner there, this is where one of these short bent gouges will get right in there nicely. There it is. And also down here. But I would have to turn this around, but you can see what I'm doing. I'm coming in like this. But I'm going to get in the way of the camera. So, that's basically what we're doing. We're setting in the actual edge with the shape of a gouge that matches the edge all the way along, or the letter, it doesn't matter what it is. So that's, again, we've got a nice neat junction between the two, and we've got this edge here and this background smoothed using our flat gouges, and where we need to, we'll use one of these skew chisels into these tight corners like this. I've been at the carving now for a few hours, and you can see that I've cleared away a lot of the background using the same sort of techniques that I've just described. I want to go over one or two of the points again, just to emphasize a few things that we're doing. The first thing we need to be careful of is that this background here, and this background here, and this one all look in the same plane. They won't be exactly truly right because we're just hand carving, but they want to appear to go through and be a consistent background. The other thing we need to be aware of is two lines, one of which is the junction between, say, this wall and the background, and this wall and the actual surface. And you can see it here where some of the paper's coming off here. We pull that down there. What I'm after is a really sharp edge here. That's what we're going to see. So we need to be clear about that. And when we take the paper off, we need to check that and retune it, because it won't be quite right because the paper, might have obscured it a little bit. The other thing that I've done here is where I've got a carving that's going underneath or behind the letter element, I've actually scored the wood down here. That's why the paper has been able to come off. I've scored the edge, this leading edge that we're talking about, up here and along here. So that sets in that line ready for carving. This little piece here is further back, so I haven't really worked that. What's the other thing that's really important to understand is that This is a letter H, but it's a really weird letter, and this is a bird and this is a leaf, and it's the same technique whether you're setting in a petal or setting in a letter. It doesn't really matter. This is basic lowering, leveling, setting in. It's a standard sort of carving thing. So you can adapt this to any sort of letter you like, or any sort of carving you like. Another thing I would say is that this little angle here on the wall, that's there to reflect light, but sometimes we don't want that. For example, here this bird is going to be rounded over, so I really can come straight down here, and the same with these petals, although you know, when I was showing you earlier on, I did put an angle cut in, then I realized I didn't need that. I can come straight down like this, 90 degrees, because I might even undercut, but the important thing is not to stab into the background so that you're able to undercut without leaving a stab mark in there. And of course, if you do take an area too deep, the thing to do, or at the wall, is just to spread it out, and then you won't really notice. So there you go, those are some thoughts about it. I've just been quietly working away in the way I showed you. I've got a few things here to do. This is a very tight little edge. I'm going to work on that, and then I'll leave these areas here, and we'll look at that separately. But let me just turn to this point up here, this small little point, this little area here. This top bit here is quite tricky because it's very small little details. What I want to show you really is if we look, for example, here, the pink represents the waste wood, if you remember. So what I need to do is take a gouge and nibble this back. So it's a good technique is just to push this back like this till we get to the edge, and I do it here. Little turning cuts like this. So I'm quite close to the finished line, and then I would take that away. So I'm creeping up on it, so I leave as little as possible. I'm going to get in the way here. I'm working downhill, obviously. So I'm getting in quite close to it, and then when I'm nearly there, I find, say like here, the tool that will do that curve, and I'll set that in. Now I can't quite copy these pencil lines, they're very loose and drawn with a pen, so I'm going to have to use the tools to make the cuts. So I'll pick the tool that will make an appropriate cut, and that's what's going to be our finished edge. So for example here, I'm going to use this cut around here, like that, and start cleaning up just as I did before. So what I'm saying is that we need smaller tools, but we can sneak up and we can make the tools create the edge. Just take that away there. With something big like this, what I'm going to do is take a tool, as I've done over here, and just create this first main shape here, and then I would subdivide it with a smaller tool like this here. So what I'm really concerned about when I take the paper off will be this edge around. So it's quite picky, but that's the way I'm approaching it. And when I've made one good pass, I'm going to go over it a second time very carefully and make sure that's all nice and clean. Sometimes this glue, this photo mount, peels quite easily, but other times it's a little bit fiddly. So what I use is some sort of alcohol, like denatured alcohol, and this will dissolve the glue much more quickly and not affect the wood. So you can see that that comes off readily. I don't want to take that bit off yet. We're going to take this bit off here. For example, here I'm going to take this bit off because I know I've cut it through, and so on. So I'm going to take this off, then I can see more readily what I've got, and you can see that's coming off nicely. And up here, I'll take all this off, but not that bit. So the bits I'm still left to carve, I'm going to still work on. There you go. And so on. So I'll get this all off, then I'll look at these edges and I can make sure they're as I want. I think when you take the paper off, you can really see the carving coming into its own. It's the end of the setting in stage, and I can see, if I look very carefully, that some of these lines need a little bit of tuning, which is fine. We can do that. So now we're really left with these little pieces in here where they cut into the page. This is on the surface, of course. We've got the flower and we've got the little bird. So I think we'll turn to the flower next, see if we can sort that out. Carve our daffodil underneath the letter.